basically two messages I want to get across in this talk. The first is that the world is about to have lots of robots in it. That just like our students are used to having computers, cell phones, technology like that, they're soon going to be used to having robots around them and interacting with them. And so we as educators also had better get used to that. We better get used to interacting with robots and talking with our students about what it means to have robots all around them. The other is, we've been getting used to the idea that students should have access to robots and can learn things from robots. When I was a graduate student, you had to be in an elite graduate program to have access to a robot, and then after a little while, undergraduates started having them, and now elementary school kids have access to robots, and they're getting comfortable with robots. But we're used to using robots to teach computer science or robotics, sort of side topics that aren't really in the main core of what we typically teach our students. They're enriching. This talk is also going to make the point that we can use robots to teach the core mathematical subjects. So with that, let me jump in. So first of all, to try to drive home the point that robots are coming, let's look at the parallel with computers. There's a sort of widely circulated quote from 1943 that's attributed to Thomas Watson, the chairman of IBM, that I think there's a world market for maybe 5 computers. Now it turns out that's apocryphal. There's no evidence that he actually said that, but that was plausible in a world where computers filled entire rooms and were made of vacuum tubes and things like that. A quote that there is documentation for is by Sir Charles Darwin, the grandson of the Charles Darwin that you're familiar with. He was the head of a research institute in Great Britain studying the use of computers. And he wrote that it's very possible that one machine would suffice to solve all the world's problems, all the problems that are demanded of it from the whole country, not the world, the country. That was sort of lack of foresight, I'd say. And in 1977, Ken Olsen, who was the founder and chairman of DEC Corporation, said there's no reason anyone would want a computer in their home. Now this is also sort of widely taken out of context. He actually did have a computer in his home, but he meant, why would we ever want a computer to control things like our lights or our thermostat or our garage door, which, again, that's happened today. So let's fast forward to closer to the modern day. By 2008, the world completely changed. Instead of seeing quotes like that, there were an estimated 1 billion PCs in the world. And today there's close to 2 billion PCs plus tablets, smartphones, wearable computers like the widely touted now Google Glass, watches. And I think there were actually, I saw recently, there were more than 50 million iPhones sold in the last quarter in a 3-month period. And all of this has been enabled by research in computer science. So now let's look at sort of the trend, the industry growth. This is, again, still for computers. This is a log scale. So back in the 1970s, and this is the number of units shipped per year, so number of computers sold. It was in the low thousands. And now we're in the hundreds of millions every year. So that's computers. It happened. The transformation happened, right? From almost no computers to computers being everywhere in our houses, in our pockets, on our bodies. Where are we in terms of robots? So this is a different statistic. This is the estimated operational stock of industrial robots. So it's not the units being shipped, it's the ones actually in existence, broken down by Asia, Europe, and America. And this is sort of forecasted in the future. It's still in the hundreds of thousands. So on this graph, on this graph we're talking sort of right around here. It hasn't really, we're still, if you think of this as an exponential curve, we're still sort of at that flat part before it really takes off. But it's happening, right? So if you follow this trend, we're going to start seeing robots sort of taking off in the world the way computers did. Now, what's going to make that happen? So first of all, this refers to entirely industrial robots. Industrial robots sort of look like this, typically. Robots that are in a closed room, you wouldn't let a person anywhere near them. much too strong, much too dangerous, but they do some amazing things. So here's, for instance, Tesla's. This is a picture of a video of the Tesla factory, the robots are doing everything. Right? They can put together a car in about 3 days, and there's some amazing parts of this where the robots are manipulating and moving the pieces in through the windows. I'm not going to show the whole video, you can see it online, but that's sort of what has typically been meant by industrial robots. But the world is changing a little bit. There's this system where industrial robots start looking like this. This is a video of Kiva Systems, which was bought by Amazon.com. These are autonomous robots that are basically moving the shelves around in an Amazon.com warehouse, bringing the goods to the person who then packs the boxes when you order a bunch of books. So instead of now having a person walking around the warehouse, robots are to pick up the books or whatever you're ordering from Amazon, the robots are bringing them to the person. And this is one of the sort of latest robots, Baxter, that's also designed as an industrial robot, but now built and designed to be in the same space that people are in, not in a closed room and moving in very dangerous and fast ways. It's got what's known as compliant control, so you can walk up to it and you can actually, if you push on the arm, it'll give a little bit. If it bumps into you, it's not going to keep pushing through. It's got compliant control. And so industrial robots are sort of starting to become more human-friendly. But it's not industrial robots that are going to get us past this curve that happened with PCs. It's going to be robots everywhere, ubiquitous robots that our students are used to having in their home. And how's that going to happen? Well, there's already some progress towards that. You can buy a robot vacuum cleaner for less than $200, a Roomba. And there's actually a whole host of companies now working on telepresence robotics. So these are robots that can be that can move around in a space, and your face can be on it while you're at home, and you can be talking and listening to the people in the conference. In fact, there's a computer science conference this summer, the International Conference on Automated Planning and Scheduling that I sometimes go to, and they recently circulated a survey asking participants, would you consider attending the conference remotely using one of these telepresence robots? And they're asking us, how much would you pay to do that? Would you bid per hour and stuff like that? So it's now possible to, so you could be at home and watch some of the sessions. Is there a question in the back? Yeah.
Actually, there's a double robot downstairs at the same booth.
Oh, okay. Good. So that's so you can even see it here. So these are examples of robots starting to be everywhere. And this transition to ubiquitous robots is going to be enabled by our current students. I'm teaching mostly undergraduates and graduates in the university, but the students in high school are soon to be those students, and it's going to be enabled by education in STEM and robotics in many different topics. At the high school level, algebra, geometry, and trigonometry. But also then, that feeding in as prerequisites for learning about robotics and manipulation and computer vision and artificial intelligence and many, many other topics. And just to give you a sense of sort of the kinds of capabilities that robots now have that haven't made it into the marketplace, I'm going to show you sort of some of the latest things that I've seen and been impressed by. So this is by a company called Boston Dynamics, which is now called Google. Google's buying everything, but this is a robot. This is not an animal inside of a suit. This is actually a robot running, so this is to me very impressive robot locomotion. And you can see this video online. This is a robot called Wildcat. Robots can ride bicycles. This is a real robot riding a bicycle. So these are things that aren't in the marketplace yet, but these kinds of capabilities are going to open up the possibilities of robots being in your home. This one's easier to imagine how it would apply. This is, I think, one of the more impressive capabilities of robots these days. It's from a colleague of mine, Peter Abeel at Berkeley. Took a PR2 robot and showed that it can fold towels. So it had a stack of just 5 towels, and it found them, picked them up, and folded them. Now, to be able to watch this, this video is sped up by 50 times. Right? It happens painfully slowly, so it's not ready. You don't like envision buying this and not ever having to do laundry again. It would take you probably a month to have your laundry folded, but it's progress. The real cutting edge right now is that there's a competition going on called the DARPA Robotics Challenge. And this is a robot called Shaft. It's also been bought by Google, it turns out. But it's doing things like driving a car. This is not an autonomous car. This is a robot actually sitting in a car, driving the car, turning the steering wheel and stuff. The same robot walking over sort of uneven terrain. The robot had to do a series of 8 different tasks, so like walking up a ladder. These are things that's going on right now. There's like 7 or 8 teams around the world that are trying to do all of these tasks, picking up debris. I'm not going to show this whole video either. It's just to get across the point that there's amazing things robots can do. This is actually a shot from the DARPA Urban Challenge. This was my car at UT Austin. We had an entry in the challenge, and there's no person in this car. And this was back in 2007. And it had to turn left across traffic, and so you'll see once there's a gap in traffic, it does turn left, and it did that, and it completed this loop 8 times in about 20 minutes. And so it's, cars are now driving themselves. This was actually, I used it as an education project. There were a bunch of undergrads that were a part of this work to see where this can go when you get to the extreme. This is a colleague of mine, Zico Coulter from Stanford, showed how you might be able to parallel park in the future with autonomous cars. Again, no person in this car. This is a little bit don't try it at home kind of thing. Oh, there is a person in the car, but they're not driving. That was an extreme way to parallel park. So all of this is just to say that robots are sort of to open up your imagination and say, to me it's inconceivable that these kinds of capabilities aren't going to find their way into the marketplace, find their way into our students' homes, and they're going to be used to working with robots. And so we're going to need to be able to communicate with them about what it is to be interacting with robots, but also it's going to give us an opportunity to use their comfort with robots to be better at math and algebra and algebra, geometry, trigonometry. Now there's a huge sort of buzz in the education world about ways that we can improve the classroom. And this is happening both at the high school level, also at the university level. I teach a flipped class to first-year computer science students. There's MOOCs, there's gamification, online courses. There's all kinds of ways that we can try to improve education. But the basic thing that we're fighting with is that students come into a classroom and we're trying to teach them algebra, and their reaction is, well, who cares about quadratic equations? Why do I care? Why do I care? Why do I need to learn? In fact, my wife is a middle school teacher, and just this morning she was struggling with how can I get my students to care what pi is and what the ratio is between the diameter and the circumference of a circle. Why why do they care in their in their day-to-day life? So there's sort of trying to get students engaged. That's one of the issues. And then the other, which I'm very familiar with as well, is that educators are under pressure to try to have their students do well on standardized tests. And it's not just how their students are measured, it's how the teachers themselves are measured. You know this very well. So there's sort of this confluence of pressures, the students not caring, the teachers being under pressure. And so the idea here is to consider the idea of a paradigm shift, of using robots to cut through this. And so this is a picture of a high school detention on a Saturday that I was able to attend. I was sitting in the corner back here as this was happening here in Austin just last year. And these were students who, for various reasons, had to come for a 3-hour period on their Saturday morning. And they were ready for just worksheets and business as usual. But instead, we demonstrated or prototyped a lesson where just before the lesson, we trained or interacted with a teacher, trained her to perform a lesson with a quadcopter. So this is a hovering robot that was sitting in front of the students. And what this robot was doing was changing its altitude. The teacher was able to, with a slider, move up and down. And we could see on the screen the area, there's a camera on the bottom of the robot facing down towards the floor. And we could see on the screen what was the area of the square that the camera was seeing as a function of the height. Okay? And so the students were able to see, well, when it was 1 meter up off the ground, what was the area of the square that the camera could see? If I wanted the area to be, a different size, what height would we have to get it to? If I moved it to a particular height, what would be the size of that square? They were basically hands-on seeing a quadratic relationship. Okay? And they were able to come up and play with the robot, and they were watching the robot, they were smiling, they were engaged. And they started actually caring not about this equation, but caring about how to figure out what that size of that square would be as a function of the height of the robot. Okay? And then that could get and the thing is that could drive home the message. You could be the best teacher in the world, standing up at a whiteboard, writing that equation on the board. My opinion is, at least for many students, that doesn't get the message home nearly as strongly and quickly as when they see the robot and are given the job of trying to actually figure out that for themselves, that quadratic relationship between height and area. And the fact is that they just, they live in a world where they're used to everything being electronic. Their toys, their teddy bears have batteries in them, and so which often drives me crazy. I'm always trying to take the batteries out of all the toys because they never stop making noise. But the kids are used to it. They're all around them. And that nowadays, what they're used to is iPads and things like that. There's a video that went viral a couple years ago where there's this 2-year-old girl who's handed a newspaper or a magazine, and she just tries to flip the pages and make the pictures bigger and just throws it away because it doesn't work. Right? They're used to interacting from a very young age with iPads, and they're starting to get to be used to interacting from a young age with robots. So that is in my opinion, the biggest answer to this question: why teach math and science using robots? And it carries on with the idea that most of us, many students, are visual learners. Again, this is research from other sources, but many students are visual learners, and visual learning actually helps retention. So it makes it more efficient and also helps retaining the information, especially when there's a combination of teaching modalities, visual and oral. And the key here is that robots are fun. Right? They're still, at least today, they're something that are novel, they're fun to interact with, and fun does turn into engagement. So that detention that I was at, this is a picture from that same detention. Oops. This is a picture from that same detention after the students saw the robot moving up and down and changing the area of its camera, then being given worksheets where they could take that those concrete concepts that they saw and turn them into more abstract abstractions, and now doing worksheets where they had to use the quadratic equation and answer questions specifically about how high should the robot be if you want a particular area, and vice versa. And so if you don't believe me that robots are engaging, this was a robot fashion show that some high school students put on here in Austin. This was at a Barnes & Noble, where they programmed the robots and also dressed the robots up. And listen to what the principal said.
Students need. It's applied learning, and they love it, and they will be there until 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's very few other courses that you can say that about, and they do it voluntarily, and you know that it's a wonderful thing for them. So
this to me is one of the biggest key points, and I see this every day in my lab at the university. My graduate students work with robots as well, and I'll tell you a little bit more later if there's time about some of the research we do. We have a robot soccer team and go to robot soccer competitions around the world. And when the competition is coming up, I never have to tell my students to work harder. They're there all night. If anything, I have to tell them to go home and get some sleep, You need to, you need to rest before before the next day. The physical, tangible results of your code actually making a robot do something makes all the difference in the world. And so this was teaching. This was sort of activity. This fashion show was not teaching algebra and geometry. It was teaching coding and computer science. But the engagement transfers over, and the engagement leads to, I think, is just this piece of the puzzle. Once the students are engaged, then they're focused on it. This is going to lead to success by the students. It's going to lead to high scores. It's going to lead to better success by the teachers. Everything fits together, and it really closes can help close this gap that that our jobs. This is the career readiness side of things. That our jobs need our students to be proficient in algebra. So this is some I've now sort of so far just told you why we want to try to get robots into the classrooms. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about an effort that I've been involved with that has actually done that. And so this was in my lab at UT last year. I was running a panel of some middle school and high school algebra teachers. We did a panel with algebra teachers, one with geometry teachers, some with also physics teachers, asking what would it take to be able to use robots to teach the concepts that you need to teach every day in your class, and what would a complete solution look like that you would be able to just open up and use as a curriculum. And so we did a lot of had some really interesting discussions. Showed the teachers sort of that same lesson I told you about the robot going up and down and illustrating the quadratic relationship between height and area, and came up with I've been working with a company called Robots Lab to try to put this into practice, and what has resulted is a complete solution. That is basically, you don't need, as a teacher, you don't need to know anything about robots, because that was one of the strong messages that came out of the panel, is that, well, I don't know much about robotics. How would I ever use robots to teach students? So that's sort of one key prerequisite, is that it needs to be something that you can just open the box, take the robot out, and start using it without knowing how to program or anything. And so that's been a strong goal of what we've been trying to accomplish. And another strong message that we got was that it had better be standards aligned. There better be lessons that are indexed to the star points, or it was the teaks at the time, then transition to stars, and also that there are complete sort of vertical lessons. It's not just a demonstration of that quadratic concept, but also then the whole transition from the concrete to the more abstract, and with lesson plans and worksheets and everything sort of out of the box, ready to go. So that's what we've been doing, and I'm going to show you just a brief 30-second video about sort of what's resulted, or what has come out of that. I apologize. This is sort of was built sort of as a more sales video, which so I don't try to ignore that aspect of it. But I think it gets across sort of the capabilities of what we've been able to design. So yeah, let me let that.
Can you imagine teaching math without constantly being asked, why do I need to learn this? Robots Lab Box is a teaching aid that helps bring abstract math and science concepts to life using robots. Using the lessons on the included tablet, educators can easily demonstrate abstract subjects such as quadratic equations, slope, cosine, vectors, and much more, in a way that truly engages students. Robots Lab Box is a paradigm shift that will help revolutionize the teachings of math and science for the 21st century. Find out more.
So the idea is that it is really literally a box that has 4 different robots in it and a tablet computer, and you just open it and turn on the tablet, and there you can start. You can look up the lesson that you want to do if you're doing law of cosines, or if you're doing quadratic equation, or if you're doing point slope form of lines. Whatever you're doing, you can look up the lesson, and there's something that tells you exactly what you need to, what steps you need to go through to. The curriculum right now is for math. There is under development physics. There's already some physics lessons, and that's sort of the plan moving forwards. The most fully developed curriculum are in the math classes right now. But yeah, I mean, the aim is for this to have physics and chemistry and basically the whole high school STEM core STEM curriculum. And so that's actually I think the main point here is that these are designed not to be robots as an enrichment activity to teach students about robots and computer science, but actually using the appeal and hook of robots to teach the things that they really need to learn as in their core. The math subjects, the science subjects. And so the idea of this whole endeavor is first and foremost to prepare students for the future through better learning of mathematics, and that's what I've been talking about so far. But there's some other things that this accomplishes. One is college readiness. So my students, I run a class, there's an initiative here at UT Austin called the Freshman Research Initiative that is taking first-year college students, so straight out of high school, and introducing them to research by giving them opportunities to join labs right from the beginning of their time, rather than sort of the current traditional paradigm of having students sit in classes for the first 3 years and then maybe do a capstone project in their 4th year. This is letting students get engaged in research right at the beginning, and then sort of see why they're taking the classes. Same kind of motivation that I've been giving so far. But one of the things that I saw happen just 2 weeks ago is two students from last year's class, they're now sophomores, created something with robots that I hadn't told them to do. It was their own creativity, and it was because they had sort of come in ready to interact with robots. This is a video in the atrium of our building on the UT campus, and the student here in blue had just programmed something for this other student who's a bystander. He just walked up, and he's controlling this AR drone just by tilting his hand back and forth. So if you notice, he's just tilting his hand. He's got it over it's called a leap motion sensor. So I'll play it again. It's a sensor that's detecting how his hand is tilted. And when he tilts it forward, the quad rotor moves forward, and backwards it moves backwards. And these two students, the one in red here, Matt, and Robert in blue, they're both sophomores. It was their idea to do this. And after, I sort of helped them get permission to do it in this sort of open space of our building. And afterwards, they were just jumping up and down excited. They were like, that was so much fun. People were coming and playing with our robots. Can we do that again next week? Can we do this, can we do this every week? We're going to make the demo better in this way or that way. It was just the tangible aspect of them seeing their robot flying around was amazing to them. And our students, if they can get the sort of basic math and science concepts under their belts in high school and comfort with robots, they're going to be able to jump into college and do these kinds of things. And then, of course, there's also career readiness. As I argued earlier, there are robots in the factories, and there's going to be a lot of jobs that don't just require algebra, but require some comfort with robots, either the industrial type or this sort of the old style industrial type, and even these sort of now moving to the future, more open environment industrial type robots. So the main message here is that we really that we're trying to create an opportunity for our students, and there is this great opportunity for our students because robotics hasn't taken off yet. It's still on that sort of exponential technology penetration curve. It's still at that sort of flat part that hasn't and is going to take off. So there still is the opportunity for the people in our classes today to create the basic capabilities that will transform robotics in our world, and also for them to enable new and enhance existing applications. And the key, in my opinion, one of the key sort of open questions for robotics is, what are robots going to be most useful for? There are a lot of sort of emerging applications. We've seen robots that can vacuum and mow lawns and telepresence. There's robots used for elder care and healthcare and rehabilitation and surgery and now driving. But the real question is, just like back in the 1970s, nobody would have predicted that the big application for computers was going to be smartphones or wearable computers or watches, that's where the computers were going to be. We still don't know where robots are going to be most useful in our society, and it's our students who are going to figure that out. And so, by using robots in the classroom and making them comfortable with them, the students are going to we're going to give them an opportunity to sort of stay ahead of the curve and be the ones who shape our world in this way. So with that, so far in this talk, I've talked about math and robotics education. I'm going to use the time that I have left to give you a little bit of insight into sort of the research that's going on in my lab with robotics. In particular, I mentioned earlier the robot soccer that our students are doing, and this also is applicable and relevant to high school and middle school students, because there's a worldwide initiative called RoboCup, the Robot Soccer World Cup, where there's a lot of participation by graduate students and professors, but there's also a RoboCup Junior, which is designed for middle school students and high school students, sort of like First Robotics, First Lego League, but using sort of with a different type of focus, more on robot autonomy, getting the robots to do things by themselves. It's not as popular so far in the US as it is in Europe and Asia. There's huge events in Europe and Asia and Australia. But there is a RoboCup Junior in the US as well that's been taking off and really engaging students. I'll also talk about some autonomous driving, but I'm not gonna dive too deeply into the research. Students always ask, well, how can I get involved? I always say first, well, do really well in your math and science classes, but also think about what's the problem that inspires you. And this doesn't just happen in robotics and computer science. It's happened throughout history. The Wright brothers, they had their challenge problem of manned flight, and it led to the discovery of the Bernoulli principle in air. It was known for water at the time, but not in air. The Apollo mission, the goal of landing a man on the moon, led to discoveries in remote body monitoring and in body monitoring and remote telemetry. The Manhattan Project, which arguably had positive and negative consequences to the world as a whole, scientifically, undoubtedly led to great discoveries in high energy physics and scientific computing, among others. So these three problems are problems that have already sort of reached their goal, reached completion. I've been involved for 20 years in this challenge problem that's still in progress that I've been alluding to as we go, which is robot soccer. And this is one that actually can be participated in by students, as I said, as well. And the goal of RoboCup Soccer, we have an ambitious goal as well, is by the year 2050 to create a team of humanoid robots that can beat the human World Cup champion team on a real soccer field. It's ambitious. Whenever you make predictions like this, it's good to put a year on it that's after your career is likely to be over, so no one can say, you said so. But also, that's 35 years from now. Every time I give this talk, it gets shorter and shorter that time. But a lot can happen in that time span. These kinds of challenges reach fruition also from the discovery of the double helix model to sequencing the whole human genome. That's about 50 years. From the first computer to beating the human chess champion with a computer, about 50 years. So crazy things happen in this kind of time span. So who knows? But RoboCup Soccer is still in the early stages. It has a lot of virtues that you can start having a closed loop at an early stage. We can have robots that play soccer even if they're not doing it on a real soccer field yet. And for me, it's important that we can focus on learning in multi-robot systems, because that's what my research is about. But it's also relatively easy entry. Like I said, there are RoboCup Junior teams where high school and middle school students are thinking about this. And it is really inspiring and engaging. Just like the principal of Anderson High School was saying that their students stay up all night working on that fashion show, this happens here too. And in RoboCup, the key thing from a research perspective is that there's huge progress that we can see. So there's different leagues, these are pictures of them, that sort of focus on different research challenges. The things that they have in common is that they're all fully autonomous. The robots are all autonomous, so there's no person doing a remote control or anything. Back when this started, in 1997 and 1998, it didn't look so great. So these were sort of the early robots. These are an early version of the Aibo, and they would not always even stand up, but they'd fall over. But when they fell over, they would get up. The robots would crash into walls sometimes, but they would also score some goals. Here's a goal that was scored. There wasn't much opposition from the defender, but it was a big success just to get, at that time, robots in the room working together. Lots of robots in the room working together. Most people who called themselves roboticists at this time didn't actually have robots. Right? They would work on one part of the problem. They would be the vision person or the decision-making person. This kind of a sort of challenge task made all the loop be closed. That everybody work on all parts of the problems, and that's what our students are doing when they're using robots in things like First Lego League. That was the early days. 10 years later, you should see some visible progress. So some of these same leagues, now the robots are moving much faster and they're individually more skilled. There's going to be start to see some passes, and that was the beginning back in 2005 of the Humanoid League. So this was again sort of just doing penalty shots, but even then there were some sort of things happening. And these days, if you look at that, this league, it also starts to look like these ones. The robots moving much more quickly. So this is these kinds of challenge problems. Progress is just you have to stay on top of these, ahead of this curve, because our students are seeing these things happen. Just as one sort of deep dive into the kinds of capabilities and research that happens in here and kinds of things that robots can do, there's been a lot of work now on robot vision, which is that there's computer vision, which is about shape modeling, object recognition, trying to find the chairs and the person and the faces. But robot vision, you have to deal with the fact that the camera is moving around and you have limited computation. You get the images are coming at 30 frames per second. To get a sense, this is what the world looks like through a robot, through the camera of a robot that's trying to play soccer. In some sense, this is the input to the computer programs that we're writing. And it's not even this. These are images. Really, the computer just sees an array of pixels, right? Because every picture is just an array of numbers. How green, red, and blue is each of the hundreds of pixels in this image. That's the input, and the output is how should the motors on the robot move. So those are the kinds of that's the concept of writing a computer program to play soccer, is that it has to take this stream of just numbers that translate into images as input, and then have the decision-making process of how should you move your joints. And so this has led to a bunch of research. I'm not going to talk too much about the details of it. There's been some PhD thesis in my lab from a student, Mohan Sridharan, who's now a professor at Texas Tech, on trying to learn the mapping from pixel values to the colors. But in the end, you end up with object detection that can happen in real time on board the real robot. So here you see now it can see where the goal is and where the ball is. This is overlaid over that image. And so now rather than just those raw pixels, you have a representation of where the ball is, the goal is, these objects, the distance and angle to them, and that becomes the input to the decision-making program. And so just to sort of give you a sense of how this all comes together, there's a couple of fun videos. This one is back from like 2005 or so. Fox Sports World took some of our highlights and created a really nice video. This is not what RoboCup looks like. We don't have this kind of fan support. They took some poetic license. But the key here to realize is that these robots are doing that vision processing on board the robots, and then still having time to do their processing of what should they do, how should they walk. I only sent our highlights, so all the goals were scored by our team, and the saves were by our robots. We didn't show the bad things happening. But I like this one because it shows the robot walking up to another one, getting to 2005, like I said, that the RoboCup League that we participate in has now moved to humanoid robots. Those robots were made by Sony. The dogs were the Sony Aibos. Sony stopped making those, and we transitioned to humanoid robots called Nows, made by a French company called Aldebaran. And we won. In these competitions, everybody has exactly the same robot, so it's just a programming competition. We won the competition in 2012, and UT lit the tower orange for us, which they usually only do when the football team wins, so we were proud of that. But this is what that looks like now. These are our robots are the ones with their arms behind their backs. This was the finals of the competition in 2012. You have to remember that, again, there's no remote control. These robots are doing everything by themselves. We were playing against a team that had won the past 3 years from University of Bremen. I'll let it run here just so you can see our first goal. But there's a whole, again, same kinds of challenges. We have to get the robots to walk. We have to get the robots to see and figure out where they are. And notice that now the goals are the same color on both sides, so there's symmetry. And the robots have to figure out, even so, which direction to move. And some teams had trouble and would go against their own goals sometimes. So, but this is sort of what the competitions look like nowadays. And we're now at the point, I said the goal is to have humans playing against robots. I've had, since 2007, the opportunity to actually play soccer against robots. We take the world champions of one of the leagues, the middle-sized league, that's sort of the fastest moving, biggest robots, and have them play against a bunch of middle-aged amateur soccer players. And every time the people who program the robots say, "Oh, forget it, we're not going to let you on the field. These robots are way too fast for you. They're going to hurt you. They're going to, it's going to be very dangerous." And this was 2 years what happened when we sort of middle-aged amateurs got on here. The robots really didn't stand a chance. So we still have a ways to go. They usually we can still move faster and smarter. I actually got called up for offsides on that. They didn't allow the goal, but in any case, it's still good fun. So with that, I just want to wrap up by I've gone through a bunch of different threads in this talk. This ending part was sort of a fun sort of view into the research that I'm doing at the university level. But I think it's not to be ignored, because research that was happening like I said at the beginning, research that used to be only happening at the university level has quickly sort of filtered down to first graduate students and undergraduates, then high school and middle school and elementary school kids are now working hands-on with robotics. And these kinds of things are going to be accessible to our students, to your students, before too long. And so the points that I've been trying to get across here are that, first of all, robotics is the wave of the future. That robots are coming just in the way that computers are everywhere now. Robots are going to be everywhere before too long. Students are used to interacting with technology, and they will be used to interacting with robots. And when they do, they're going to be able to learn faster and better using robots, not just about computer science and robotics, but about all the areas, all the STEM areas, including core mathematics and core science. It's also going to be able to bring robots into the classroom for these purposes is also going to improve the career and college readiness of the students. So if you're interested in learning more, there is this box, the Robots Lab box, which is now available. It got launched at TCEA last year. So there's a booth, number 2527, where you can come and see the products, see some of the demos, see the lesson plans, and see what I think is really can make a huge difference.